Blackglass Bastion filled the Wayfarer's view screen like a broken crown around a blue-white star. Its plates were dark and sharp-edged, bristling with weapons and docking spines. On the bridge, Commodore Jalen Voss watched in thoughtful silence. Around him, the senior staff did their work. Pilot Tessa Voronov guiding their course with small, precise adjustments, Dr. Nomi Park and Professor Ishan Rao skimming incoming data, Sergeant Amadou Klein leaning against a bulkhead in easy, watchful readiness. Lieutenant Eren Malik stood at the tactical rail. He studied the station's silhouette and the glowing icon floating over a sealed container on the far side of the bridge, the pulse gate key. The device inside could punch temporary stable tunnels through hyperspace, turning choke points into suggestions. If we hoard it, we buy a few years' lead, Voss had told them in the last briefing. If we share it, we change the game for everyone. Either way, assassins, empires, and raiders will all have opinions. The first of those opinions waited at Saffron Key, the neutral trade station tethered beside Blackglass Bastion. "Message from Bastion, sir," communications said. "Hold position. They want the initial delegation at Saffron Key. They'll escort the shuttle." Voss nodded. "Understood. Malik, you'll head security planet side, station side." "Yes, sir." Eren felt the familiar edge of nerves sharpen into focus. He had read the briefings on the Selqari, secretive assassins, their silent crown enforcing contracts across half a sector through the ever-present threat of precise violence. He had grown up in tight station corridors where a burst pipe or a careless fistfight could kill by ricochet. Assassins were new, enclosed spaces were not. The shuttle's docking clamps thudded into Saffron Key with a dull vibration. The hatch cycled open on warm, crowded air thick with spices, coolant, and too many species and not quite enough space. The Selqari delegation waited just beyond the lock. Tall, angular figures wrapped in dark cloaks, faces hidden behind polished masks with mirrored lenses. Ritual scars traced pale lines along what skin was visible. At their center stood Archon Delcar Sale, head of the Silent Crown, his black and gold mask expressionless and utterly still. Beside him, a smaller figure in a simple blue robe and plain mask watched from under a raised hood. The slightness of the shoulders, the restless grip on the robe's edge, a child. Voss stepped forward, formal and unarmed. "Archon Delcar Sale, Jalen Voss, HSS Wayfarer, we appreciate the opportunity to speak." "Commodore Voss." Delcar's voice was smooth, faintly resonant. "Our ledgers show potential alignment. Your people wish to cross our shadows. We wish to know on what terms." He did not offer a hand. Voss inclined his head in a short bow. "This is my security lead, Lieutenant Eren Malik," Voss said. "Dr. Nomi Park, Professor Ishan Rao, Sergeant Amadou Klein." Delcar turned slightly. "My blood heir Lyri Sale," he said. "She observes." Lyri's mask tilted toward the humans. She said nothing, but Eren felt the intensity of her gaze like a touch. They walked together along a main concourse, escorts flanking them. Stalls and signs created a riot of color and sound. Ulan in mobile water spheres glided past Norrathi mercenaries in gray armor and human traders in faded jumpsuits. Every few paces, a Selqari lingered in a doorway, lenses glittering, watching. The initial talks in a private chamber were all careful words and veiled threats. Delcar wanted exclusive rights to guard any human use of the pulse gate key in their claimed regions. Voss spoke of partnership instead, shared guardianship, safe passage for non-military ships of all species, information exchange. They adjourned with nothing decided, tension suspended like a trap that had not yet snapped. It was only later, with duties briefly lightened, that Eren wandered the station alone and met the real beginning of the story. He walked through threaded corridors, letting the flow of crowd and the pressure of walls sink into his nerves. He watched where lights flickered, where vents rattled, where the air tasted wrong. Years in security had taught him that trouble liked weak points. A sudden chill seeped down the corridor. The temperature dropped faster than it should. Breath misted in faint clouds. A nearby wall panel began to frost at the edges. "Enviro glitch," Eren muttered. Doors along the passage started to slide closed, compartmentalizing the failing section. People hurried through without looking around, tugging cloaks tighter, cursing softly. Then he saw a small figure in a recessed alcove. A child, thin cloak no match for the cold, mask fogged, shoulders shaking. Selqari alone. The nearest doors were nearly shut. When they sealed, auto systems would cut life support to the failing span to protect the rest of the station. Anyone left inside would suffocate or freeze. One part of Eren's mind recited every diplomatic caution he had ever been taught. Another calculated distance, door speed, and the child's unsteady attempts to stand. He moved. He shrugged off his insulated duty coat as he crossed the gap, bare skin instantly prickling. He dropped to one knee in front of the child. "Hey," he said, keeping his voice calm. "Bad time for a malfunction." The child flinched but did not pull away. "This'll help," Eren said. He wrapped the coat around the small body, tightening it with quick hands, adjusting the cuffs to seal around long, thin wrists. The fabric responded to new contact, warmth blooming. The child stiffened at the touch, then clutched the coat tighter. "You didn't ask for trade," a small, distorted voice said through the mask. The trade words were halting but clear. "You were cold," Eren said simply. "I had a jacket, that's it." He slipped an arm under their shoulders. "We need to get past those doors. Can you walk?" A tiny nod. Together they staggered toward the shrinking gap. Eren half pulled, half carried, the cold gnawing into his bare arms. They squeezed through with heartbeats to spare. The door clanged shut behind them. Warmer air washed over them. Eren eased the child down onto a bench. "Stay bundled up until you stop shaking," he said. "Then find your people." "All right." The child stared up at him, mirrored lenses cracked with a fine line. Thin fingers dug into the coat. "You did not know my name," they said. "Don't need to," Eren said, backing away. "Take care." A Selqari guard pounded up the corridor, cloak flaring. "What happened?" he demanded. "Enviro glitch in there," Eren said, jerking a thumb toward the sealed section. "Your kid got caught on the wrong side of a bad door." He did not stay to argue or be thanked. Protocols and forms could catch up later. His arms hurt. He rubbed them briskly as he melted back into the station's flow. Behind him, Lyri Sale sat on the bench, wrapped in a human coat. She knew their debt laws. A gift accepted in a moment that might mean life or death, given without prior agreement, created a binding obligation that could not be bought off. She had known when she grabbed the fabric. It still felt different than she had imagined. News of the incident reached Blackglass Bastion before the Wayfarer's shuttle had even docked. By the time Eren stepped onto the Assassin Fortress's reception deck later that cycle, Archon Delcar had already convened an inner council. Blade Mother Syhex, scarred and hard-eyed, stood at his side. Broker Vonal, slim and calm, watched from the shadows, always measuring. Lyri knelt in the center of the chamber, head bowed. "The human gave you his only thermal layer," Delcar said. "He did not ask who you were. He did not ask for payment. He did not specify terms before acting." Lyri's voice shook, but not from fear. "Yes, he simply acted. And you accepted. You pulled his fabric around you and used its warmth." Delcar's eyes, hidden behind black glass, never left her. "You understood what that meant." "I did," she whispered. "It seemed right." Syhex shifted, barely containing herself. "Archon, he is an outsider. His species does not live by our ledger to grant such weight to his impulse. If we only honor our codes when it suits us," Delcar said quietly, "they are decorations, not law." He turned to the wall of engraved names and empty space. "Record this," he told Syhex. "Under unpayable obligations. Eren Malik, human rank lieutenant, ship Wayfarer. He and those directly under his command are to be considered kin in matters of protection." Syhex's jaw clenched, but she obeyed. The decree rippled through the silent crown. A human now had a binding claim on their leader's bloodline. To harm him or allow harm through inaction would stain their honor. When Eren arrived on Bastion for formal talks, he did not know any of this. He only knew that the Selqari guards gave him a little more room than most, and that Lyri seemed to appear near him at every turn. Over the next day, humans and Selqari circled each other. Nomi volunteered in Blackglass Bastion's infirmary, treating wounded dockworkers regardless of species or ability to pay. Selqari medics noted each action, puzzled that she refused formal contracts. Amadou sparred with apprentices in the training pits, showing them how human squads used overlapping fields of fire and physical shielding. Syhex watched as he deliberately stepped into blows to protect less experienced Marines during drills. "You train to be struck," she observed afterward, more curious than mocking. "I train to keep my people breathing," Amadou replied. "Sometimes that's the same thing." Ishin listened to Selqari legal terms and began sketching out how their debt law might stretch without breaking. Lyri followed Eren. She asked about human childhood games, about why he noticed small structural cracks in the station, about his reflex of stepping between others in trouble. "Why did you not wait to see if someone else would help me?" she asked once. "Because I was there and you were cold," he said. "If I'd walked past and you died, I'd have to live with that. I'm not good at that kind of math." She tried to fit this into her sense of ledgers and debts and failed. It made something in her breathe easier anyway. Far away, aboard a Norrathi warship, Legate Bruk Talon studied holofeeds of the humans and Selqari mingling. He saw Delkar's rare inclination toward balance. He heard rumors of a human device that could change the map. He extrapolated. "If humanity shares this key widely," he told his officers, "they undermine every power that relies on narrow straits and toll choke points. If they give it to the assassins alone, the Silent Crown becomes gatekeeper to half the stars. Either way, we lose control." He formulated a plan with practiced ruthlessness, smuggled saboteurs, bribed Selqari malcontents, a manufactured attack at a public event, blame shifted, fleets responding as neutral arbiters. "And in the confusion," he said, watching a glimmering model of Blackglass Bastion rotate, "we take the key and erase their version of the truth." His officers hesitated, but ambition outweighed caution. Orders went out quietly: infiltrate, arm, wait. The banquet on Blackglass Bastion was designed to impress and intimidate at once. An assembly hall opened like an amphitheater around a central dais. Holographic histories floated above in slow orbits, showing stylized contracts fulfilled and betrayals avenged. Humans occupied a prominent table. Selqari guards blended into columns and shadows. Lyri sat on a low step near her father's chair, close enough to listen, far enough to be ignored by most adults. Eren stood behind the human table, scanning entry points and sealing struts. Voss and Delkar made speeches. Voss spoke of open lanes and shared prosperity. Delkar framed safety as a service rendered and debt owed. Neither moved far from their culture's habits. The first explosion cut the power. Lights died. Red emergency strips flickered on a second later. Gravity lurched. Then fire lanced across the darkness. Sharp, muffled shots from concealed positions, the hiss of energized blades. Eren's world narrowed. In the confusion he saw Lyri stumble on the dais, small body exposed and alone. An armored figure raised a weapon in her direction. He vaulted an overturned chair, ignoring shouted warnings. A bolt scorched his shoulder. He smelled burning cloth and skin. He reached Lyri in 3 long strides, wrapped his arms around her and pitched both of them behind a toppled column base. "Stay down," he said, chest heaving. Lyri clung, fingers digging into his already injured arm. Around them, chaos reigned. Nomi crawled to the nearest fallen body, hands already searching for vital signs. Amadou used a table as both shield and battering ram, leading Marines in a rough push to create a corridor for civilians. Selqari assassins, once reoriented, moved like shadows with knives of light. Delkar saw his heir vanish under a falling pillar and then reappear under the human's protection. He heard the ring in Lyri's voice weeks earlier when she spoke of the coat. In the old days, he might have focused on eliminating the attackers and sorting debts later. Now another calculus overlaid the bloodshed. When Eren took a blast of shrapnel across the back, still sheltering Lyri, Delkar snapped. "Protect the shield favored," he shouted in Selqari, voice cutting through noise. "Protect all under his banner." The phrase hit the guild like an electric charge. Their code, their law, invoked in the heat of battle to expand a personal obligation to a wider circle. Some who had been holding back, uncertain of the politics, moved with new certainty. Lyri pushed herself to her feet atop the broken step, heart pounding. Her father had opened the door. She flung it wide. "By blood and by deed," she cried, voice amplified by her mask. "Eren Malik and those with him are my clan. Any hand raised against them is raised against me. The declaration was unprecedented, a heir binding an outsider into her clan in front of half the guild. It also worked. Selqari, who might have quietly watched humans fend for themselves, now slammed into attackers trying to reach medical staff and marines. Knives flashed, and Norrathi saboteurs wearing stolen Selqari armor died with surprise frozen on their faces. Within minutes, the immediate assault in the hall faltered. Bodies lay scattered. Human, Selqari, Norrathi. Smoke hung in the air. Emergency systems groaned their way back toward stability. But as Voss and Delkar's hastily assembled war council learned within the hour, the banquet attack had been only the opening move. Power routes to core systems flickered on and off suspiciously. Sensor logs showed tampering. Small teams of unknowns were ghosting through maintenance spaces. A Norrathi fleet was altering course toward Bastion at a pace that did not fit any plausible rescue mission. "They mean to blow your reactor and blame us," Ishin said, reviewing intercepted fragments, "and to seize the key in the confusion if they can." Delkar's scars stood out stark against his skin. "We will stop them," he said. "This station was built to survive worse." "Maybe," Voss said. "But if they get hold of the key, or even if they just convince everyone you tried to take it, this sector burns for decades." He looked at Lyri, who still wore faint ash smears on her mask from the hall. "You said yourself our ledgers are different," he went on. "We don't want that kind of power concentrated anywhere. Not with you, not with them, not even with us." Nomi, slumped in a corner chair, wiped a line of Selqari blood from her sleeve. "We came out here hoping to light more candles," she murmured. "Not build a bigger cage." Lyri remembered the weight of the borrowed coat and the feeling of Eren's back taking blows that were meant for her. She thought of Nomi treating strangers without pausing to ask for payment. "Our code says a debt to the future outweighs profitable comfort," she said slowly. "We write it in our histories when someone sacrifices now to preserve a greater flow later." Syhex frowned. "Those are rare entries, reserved for foundational acts." "This is foundational," Lyri said. "Release the keys designed to all, not just to a few empires, to everyone listening. Claim the act. Call it strength, not weakness." Selqari advisors exchanged alarmed looks. To throw away such leverage ran counter to everything they had been. Voss did not hide his approval. "We plan to share it eventually," he said. "Doing it now might keep Bruk from profiting on it. And it forces everyone to adapt at once instead of one power grabbing it first." Delkar weighed futures, hoard and risk endless shadow wars over a piece of stolen tech, share and earn the hatred of those who preferred narrow throats to open plains. His daughter watched him, more open than she realized. "Very well," he said at last. "We will loose this fire together, but in return you will wear every blade that comes at us because of it." He turned to Eren. "And you will not die before the first sparks land. My heir has laid our honor on your life. I will not feel that weight wasted." Eren, bandaged and exhausted, almost protested. Voss shot him a warning glance. "We'll try not to," Eren said dryly. They divided into teams. One to secure the vault and ensure the physical pulse gate key could not be used as hostage or trophy. One to root out saboteurs in power nodes. And one, their most dangerous, to reach the reactor core where Bruk's demolition charge and control relay waited. The core access shaft was cramped, its zero-G transition abrupt. Eren, Lyri, Syhex, Amadou, and 2 Marines pulled themselves along handholds, the thrum of the reactor humming through the metal like a steady, predatory heartbeat. "Your people are very comfortable scrambling through dangerous tubes," Lyri remarked. "We grew up in places held together by duct tape and stubbornness," Eren said. "You get used to it." They emerged onto an upper catwalk in a spherical chamber. Below hung the reactor, a blazing sphere of controlled plasma wrapped in magnetic fields, catwalks like spokes of a wheel around it. On a lower walkway, Bruk Talon stood with a small Norrathi guard detail. A compact detonator nestled in his good hand. Microcharges were visible at key supports. "You're late," Bruk called, his voice carrying eerily well. "I was beginning to think you didn't care enough about your own survival to show up." Eren took in the jamming field, the arcs of possible fire, the precarious handrails. One hard twitch of Bruk's thumb and the station would become a memorial. "Bruk," Syhex said, every syllable saturated with contempt. You bring stolen armor into our house. You bribe our weak. You expect to leave alive. I expect to leave important, Bruk replied. Alive depends on timing. He lifted the detonator slightly. I advise avoiding sudden moves. The jammed comms made coordination impossible for the moment. Voss's plan, to broadcast the key's data to every receiver, sat ready in buffers, waiting for a path through interference. Eren knew he could not outshoot Bruk from here. He doubted even Syhex could cross the distance before a twitch became a squeeze. He also knew that Bruk had built a life on predictable patterns of greed and fear. Break the pattern and maybe a sliver of advantage appeared. He unlatched his sidearm harness, fingers moving slowly, and let the pistol drift behind him. Stop, Syhex hissed. Easy, Eren murmured. He's expecting us to charge or bargain. Let's try something that confuses him. Bruk's gaze narrowed. What is this, some mammalian martyrdom ritual? No, Eren said. It's a reminder. You're holding something you think is a single lever that gives you all the power. It is. One valve in a big, messy system. He stepped to the edge of the catwalk, hands empty in full view. You came here to steal a monopoly, he said, to make sure any new roads run under your guns. But even if you blow this reactor and kill us, you've already lost that chance. Bruk's lip curled. Empty words. I still have the detonator. I still control whether this station lives or dies. Lyri moved to stand beside Eren, also lowering her weapons. Her presence complicated Bruk's math. Killing her while jamming filled the air and explosions shook the hull would create consequences no one could cleanly calculate. You do not understand yet, she said. We are about to make your prize meaningless. You are pointing a knife at a rope we have already cut. As if in response, power elsewhere in the station shifted. Technicians, following Delcar's orders, rerouted bandwidth. On the Wayfarer, transmitters pushed to maximum output. For a moment the jamming field around the core faltered, overloaded by conflicting demands. Noise thinned enough for Eren's earpiece to crackle. We are live, came Tessa's delighted whisper. Burning the sky, people. Holographic projectors in the core chamber flicked, then filled with new images. The inner lattice of the pulse gate key, equations annotated in multiple languages, energy diagrams, warnings. Data radiated outward in tight beams and broad pulses, bouncing from ship to ship and relay to relay. Bruk stared as his hypothetical prize spilled everywhere at once. You fools, he breathed. You have no idea what you've unleashed. Maybe not, Eren said, but neither do you. That's an improvement. For the first time, Bruk's certainty wavered. His grip on the detonator loosened fractionally as his mind jumped ahead to consequences. Rival Norrathi captains no longer needing his promised favor, distant colonies suddenly able to ignore tariffs, assassins guarding lanes for reasons that had nothing to do with his kind of power. Syhex did not miss that wobble. She and Amadou kicked off almost simultaneously, using the lack of gravity and their knowledge of angles to launch themselves in a diagonal arc. Bruk, snapping back, tightened his thumb. Syhex had guessed exactly how much fear would tighten his grip. She aimed for his forearm rather than his chest. Her boot smashed into his arm with brutal precision. Bones snapped, his hand spasmed open. The detonator spun away. Amadou, mid-flight, twisted, slammed into a railing hard enough to bruise and still managed to snag the ugly device with one hand. A light on its surface ticked from green to amber. Nope, he said, and flung it down axis toward an open maintenance conduit. Outside, Tessa saw a small, fast object appear on a feed, vectored through a vent she had bullet into monitoring. Without waiting for anyone else's input, she fired a short burst from her shuttle's thrusters, aligning a jet of gas with the vent mouth. The blast caught the detonator as it emerged, nudging it just enough that it tumbled clear of the station's hull before detonating in useless brilliance. Inside, the reactor shuddered but held. Containment fields flared, then restabilized. Safety screamed, then calmed. Syhex landed in front of Bruk, a blade already at his throat. Blood floated from his broken arm in small, trembling spheres. The contract on your life is tempting, she said, but I find I prefer you as a living warning. Norrathi saboteurs, seeing their commander's plan fail and Selqari security teams pouring into the chamber from other access points, made the rational choice and dropped their weapons. The jamming field died entirely. Voices flooded the comm net. Other teams reported secured vaults, disabled charges, captured traitors. Above the core, the holographic schematics of the key kept scrolling. Somewhere beyond Blackglass Bastion, captains, smugglers, admirals, and free traders alike stared at incoming data and realized the world had tilted under them. In the days that followed, Blackglass Bastion hummed with unusual activity. Repair crews sealed breaches and replaced scorched panels. Ulan engineers advised on newly stressed field coils. Nomi, running on stimulants and stubbornness, supervised a mixed-species triage ward where more than one Norrathi woke to find their lives saved by the very humans they had come to frame. Why? One groggy soldier rasped, confused. Because you were dying in front of me, Nomi said. I'll be mad at you later. Selqari observers quietly recorded those interactions. Their ledgers, long used to binary entries of contract kept or broken, began to sprout a curious third column in private notes. Gifts beyond account. Amadou split his time between guard shifts and training pits, drilling squad tactics with Selqari who had rarely worked in units larger than a strike pair. When one apprentice reflexively tried to step clear of an incoming blow in an exercise, he yanked the trainee back into cover behind him instead. You fall, he said. You leave a hole in the wall. People behind you die. You don't want that. The apprentice, panting, nodded slowly. Lyri attended endless meetings as Delcar and Voss hashed out the public story. Bruk Talon, bruised and bound, made a reluctant but undeniable witness in recordings that were dispatched alongside the key schematics. He admitted to sabotaging Bastion, to attempting to frame humans, to intending to seize the key as a tool of control. His confession did not make him penitent. It made him useful. When the first official treaty signing came, it happened not in a Selqari hall but aboard the Wayfarer, in a cleared cargo bay refitted with modular tables and flags. Delcar, flanked by Sihex and Vonal, set his seal on a document recognizing certain hearth lanes, where the Silent Crown would render aid without contract to any non-hostile ship in distress, in exchange for public acknowledgement and some more traditional arrangements in other sectors. It will confuse people, Vonal said dryly. Assassins who sometimes protect for nothing. Nothing immediate, Delcar corrected. Reputation has its own compound interest. Voss signed a matching human charter, a promise to share future navigational innovations widely, not just with allies, and to bring disputes toward neutral mediation where possible. He knew not every government or corporation back home would be pleased. He signed anyway. Later, in a quieter corner of the Wayfarer, Lyri visited Eren. He sat on his bunk, his back swathed in regenerator mesh. His duty coat, last seen disappearing around Lyri's shoulders, lay folded on the chair beside him, or so he thought, until she stepped in carrying another bundle. I have altered your garment, she said. He laughed despite the aches. Didn't realize I'd given you my tailor's number, too. She unfolded the coat. It looked mostly the same, but new reinforcing threads glimmered faintly, and subtle Selqari glyphs traced the hems, marks that those in the know would recognize as protection sigils and clan notes. I returned the first after the corridor, she said. This one is symbol and armor and declaration. Anyone who can read our signs will know you walk with our shadow over you. He slipped it on. It sat on his shoulders with just enough weight to remind him it was there. Feels like responsibility, he said, and maybe like not freezing next time the heaters fail. We will be recalibrating those systems, Lyri said a little stiffly. Then her eyes softened. You understand this cannot be fully repaid. Wasn't asking for payback, he said. I know, she answered. That is why it will take so long. Outside, Blackglass Bastion dimmed its external lights for a brief span, signaling respect to departing allies. The Wayfarer's engines glowed, ready to push back into the dark and onto the new, messy grid of routes the key had made possible. In a locked vault no one admitted existed, Archon Delcar updated the oldest of the Silent Crown's hidden ledgers. He recorded how a simple act in a cold corridor had forced them to add a new clause to their code, one that compelled them, at times, to protect for the sake of a future neither side could yet see. He did not attempt to write an ending. The entry's final line was a single word that had never before appeared in that book. Ongoing. Somewhere in the wider galaxy, a second physical pulse gate key prototype, spirited away during the chaos by hands still unidentified, blinked in a secret hold. Its thief smiled at the thought of future bargains. The new lanes would bring more ships and more dangers into contact. Governments would adapt or resist. Pirates would test the newly opened corridors. The silent crown would feel its hearthfire claws tug against old habits. Humans would argue among themselves about how much they had given away. But in the memory of a shivering child who had been wrapped in a stranger's warmth without a word of price, and in the mind of a lieutenant who had never been good at walking past someone in need, the logic remained simple. You were there. Someone needed help. You acted. In a galaxy suddenly full of new roads, that stubborn simplicity had turned out to be its own kind of power.